Welcome to the Naked Life Podcast, where stripping is a way of life. I'm your host, Lo and Wendy. Shall we get started? Because I know you're ready. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Naked Life Podcast. I'm so excited to have Wendy on. She is the divorce rehab recovery coach, and I'm just really excited to have her on and just have her input in. So thank you for coming on, Wendy.
Thanks for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
So tell people a little bit about your story and how you became a divorce recovery coach.
Sure. So, definitely was not planned. We can start by saying that. I will never forget the day, oh gosh, almost 6 years ago now, where my now ex husband and I were driving home from a couple's night out. It was very late at night, and his cell phone rang not once, but 5 times from a female colleague. And it was in that moment that I got reacquainted with my intuition because my gut punched me harder than I have ever felt being punched before. And I knew something didn't feel right. And after, about 24 hours of me wrestling with what to do and arguments, I decided that I get to trust my intuition and I kicked him out. Little did I know that my intuition was right, because the next day I discovered the truth, and that was that he had been having an affair with a female colleague for over 3 years. And it was really in that moment that I I woke up. I realized that I had really just allowed this person to become my mirror, and I lost my identity. I lost my voice. I didn't know who I was. And the ironic part is that, here I was in a 20-year corporate America career, in the height of it, working at, heading up a region in ad sales for a very well known female lifestyle brand, knowing who I was at work. But here I was at home, just knowing I didn't even know who Wendy was when I looked in the mirror. And it was that wake up call that I needed to really start putting myself first, which was something I never did, because I felt like if I did that, it was selfish. And as a working mom, I already had no time for my kids. And any more time that I thought that I would take away from them, I would shy away from. But what I slowly started to realize was that I was very focused on the rearview mirror, and I was acting in a way as though, my past was my present and my future. And it wasn't until I saw a Facebook post, right? Once you get woken up by the universe with that intuition, you can't stop listening. So I saw a Facebook post from a friend who became a life coach, and something in me said, this is what you need. And lo and behold, I hired a coach and also signed up to get accredited as one. And I realized the power of it, because therapy, the entire 8 months before, hadn't moved me as quickly as a 2-day weekend training to be a coach. And I knew that there was something here, and it was my destiny to not only file for divorce and to really start living life on my own terms, but it was also time to leave corporate and to start divorce rehab. And that's how it happened. So, my entire foundation of my business is founded on the premise that divorce can be the most empowering experience that we go through to reclaim our voice and identity, so that we get to design a life that we choose instead of feeling stuck with the one our ex left us with. So ultimately, my mission on this planet in this lifetime is really around changing the stigma around divorce from shame to empowerment, because my divorce was a gift. It was the gift of me. I got myself back. And while we were the last couple that anyone thought was going to get divorced, we were the last, and yet here we were the first. And I can tell you, standing here 6 years later, after a lot of anger and pain and bitterness and resentment, I spent a lot of time wasting that negative energy, and learning how to really come from my truth, to come from self-love, to come from a place where I see my own worth. I see the value in self-care. I'm able to really truly live a beautiful life, and now finally have a really strong co-parenting relationship with my ex-husband. And If you had asked me 6 years ago if I thought we would be the friends that we are today, I would have said, you are crazy. And yet here we are. So, anything and everything is possible 100% of the time, as long as you commit to shifting how you are. I've noticed that when you do that, other people shift around you. So that is my journey, and that's how I've gotten to where I am. And I also it wasn't just coaching, it was also energy healing and sound therapy, and all these different modalities that I also put into my business now, because it's not just we don't live in a 2D world per se. There's a lot of energy exchange when you get married, and especially we were together for over 20 years, so there was some energy work that got to be done and cleared and cut, that played a really big role and tends to play a role with my clients as well. So that's my story.
Well, thank you for sharing. And there's so much to unpack there. But one of the first questions I want to ask you is what during this process did you discover about yourself or reclaim about yourself going through your divorce?
I mean, honestly, the biggest thing was knowing what I liked. I mean, and I say that because there's a specific example. My parents came to take me out for my birthday for dinner the year after we separated. And I remember my mom asking me, "Where do you want to go to dinner? We want to take you to your favorite restaurant." And I had no idea what that was. I didn't know what my favorite restaurant was. And so for me, it was really about learning learning what I liked, right? Learning what felt good to me. What was it that I wanted to pursue? And a lot of that had to do with finding room in my life for self-care, because without I didn't take care of myself. Part of reclaiming myself involved taking care of myself. There's that there's the metaphor of, like, you've got to put your oxygen mask on first before you put on your children's. And I was constantly putting their masks on. I mean, for 20 years I was putting other people's masks on for them, being that people pleaser. And it really wasn't until I realized that I had to start putting myself first, because what I was actually giving to everybody was not that great to begin with. And I, of course, did my best. I bragged about what a great multitasker I was, but really I was a crappy person because I wasn't giving 100% of the time. And so when I really started understanding, well, wow, when I take care of myself, when I give myself an hour to just read a book or go on a walk or do something, that, wow, I am either so much more productive when I get back, or I'm a much nicer person to my kids when I give myself an hour to myself. And that to me was really important, because I started noticing the difference between when I didn't take care of myself and I did. And it was a very different person. And the person I had been for 20 years was the person who never took care of herself. And I vowed never again. I wasn't going to do that ever again. And I think as a mom, it's hard. It's hard for a lot of us. But I will tell you that my kids will tell anybody. They love speaking out on some of my social platforms, and they will say, like, my God, my mom is so much happier. She's not angry all the time. She's not, getting mad at us. And, they say the same thing about their dad. We're both just happier humans who are finally living an authentic, true life. I mean, I can say that about myself. I can't speak for him, but that is very much what was probably my biggest achievement in reclaiming myself.
Yes, self-care is really, really important. I think that's the hardest lesson, not just as like mothers, because I can't speak on the authority of being a mother, but I can as a child, like witnessing my mom not putting herself first and
Right.
wishing she would. That like self-care is needed. So when like I want to take it back to like when you started giving yourself permission to give an hour to yourself, like what was any of the mindset thoughts you had that you had to rewire and overcome to just, feel okay and then
Yeah.
become like I'm a happier person when I do this. I should have been doing this all along.
Yeah. Well, so I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to what I'm about to say, which is that I think that we have it set in our mind that self-care has to look a certain way. right? We think it has to be like, oh, I'm going to go take an hour and go to the spa and get a massage or get my nails done or go on a hike or go do this, go do that. And I always thought it had to involve money. I thought it had to involve a lot of time. I thought it had to involve, I mean, to be honest, it had to involve other people. Why would I go do something by myself, right? When you come off of a marriage where there's codependency and my ex husband has narcissistic characteristics, you don't know what alone really feels like or means. And it honestly is scary. And so, what I realized is that self care can be all of 5 minutes, it can be 10 minutes, right? And it was something that was really hard for me to understand because whenever I wanted to leave, to get a break from, at the time, my husband and my kids, I had to leave the house. I mean, I have two boys who, they're now 16 and 13 and they do leave me alone. But when they were younger, around our separation and our divorce, 24/7, it was like, oh, wait, like I couldn't go to the bathroom without one of them knocking on the door needing something from me. So I always thought I had to leave the house, which isn't always possible. And so, really, the biggest first step was understanding that self care gets to look different than what I had anticipated. And it could be something that involved 5 to 10 minutes. And I have actually now built that into my calendar. It is a non-negotiable where I either, some of my 5 minute little breaks between calls, which, I encourage everyone to do. Like, you should build in 15-minute, breaks throughout every hour. You should be taking a break. And I even do that with my client calls. Halfway through, I'm like, okay, we're going to go take a pee break and then we're going to come back because, I know how much more productive and how rejuvenated we feel when we gift ourselves that. So sometimes I'll go outside and sit in the sun. Sometimes I always have a book next to my desk. And so I'll pull out a book and I'll read a chapter or a couple of pages, just to immerse myself in something different, not necessarily in work. Or I'll go make myself a cup of tea and I'll bring it back into my office. Like, just getting up, moving your body, taking your mind off of whatever it is that focuses, but something that feels nourishing. And I never understood that. And so now it's a non-negotiable. And now that I own my own business, it's also, listen, it's a lot easier because I can carve out my own schedule. However, it is possible to do when you're still working a 9 to 5 job because you get to use the restroom, you get to walk outside and get some fresh air. I mean, these are all things, it doesn't take a lot. So that was the first step to getting there.
And I think that's an important note for like people who are like working at home. If you take yourself back and you're working at the physical 9 to 5, like what did you
Yeah.
do when you just couldn't stare at the screen anymore? You got up to go to the
Right.
bathroom, you
Right.
walked around the building or something. So it doesn't mean like you're at home and you should
Right.
just sit at the computer the whole time. Like you got to take those breaks and not feel guilty about that.
Exactly. And I mean, I've worked from home now for 4.5 years. And I have to force myself. Like, that's why, I have an Apple Watch, like it pings me when I need to stand. So I have a desk that stands up. Now there's, of course, everyone's on TikTok now. And, there's women who have, those treadmills under their desk. And I have a treadmill, but now I'm thinking, well, I kind of want one under my desk because, my God, to like be able to walk while I wouldn't walk while I'm doing an interview like we are, but like if I'm on a client call, because sometimes I don't know if any of your listeners can relate to this, but like sometimes, a lot of us doodle. I like to color. So color is my form of doodling, that actually gets you refocused. And I actually think that it's a brilliant idea. Like, if you guys can get yourself to, treat yourself to that, it's amazing. So, it's just little things that you get to make time for.
In law school, my family would gift me coloring books and colors because that's what I would
Oh,
do too.
I love it.
Like one of the rules growing up in my household was, and really the only rule that my mom had was like, if we're going to do sports, we have to do something artistic. So
Mm.
like whether at the time it was singing in band, and then I negotiated in high school to have it be art because I wanted to take photography, and I couldn't do all the things like be in
Right.
choir, and then I wanted to go to on the French trip and like have French class and like do all these things. So yeah, they agreed that I could take art class instead and it still fulfill that need. But I realized like in law school, is just so like logical and mental heaviness that I was missing that piece of like just creativity
Yeah.
flow.
Yeah, you've got to. I mean, you don't need to be an artist. You don't need to be, I Lord knows I am the least creative person when it comes to like drawing or anything like that, but my creativity comes in the form of like me expressing myself through coloring, or my creativity is sometimes like I'm obsessed with Canva. Like who else loves Canva? When I'm creating, Instagram, pictures or whatever I'm doing, or one sheets. And, it's important, and I also know that I don't give my, I'm not of value to my clients if I don't take care of myself. I was just telling you before we hit record, I'm just coming back from a retreat in Sedona where I led an amazing group of women all about focusing forward. And there was one evening, like late afternoon, early evening, where I initially I was supposed to lead them on to do something. And I was not in the headspace. Like I had been drained energy wise from earlier in the day. And I said to my clients, I'm like, you know what, you guys, like I need an hour to myself. I need to recharge. I need to lay down. I need to like get myself back here, because I'm, as a divorce coach, it's, you take on and hear a lot of, emotional stories. And I, don't get me wrong, I love what I do, but I also was an example to them in how it is that you get to ask for what it is that you need. Another form of self care. You get to ask for what you need, because I knew I needed to reconnect. And I actually brought stuff to color while we were there. And I grabbed a couple of colored pencils. I grabbed one of the, postcards that I had brought that we color with. And I went into my room and I closed the door and I just sat down. I put some meditation music on and I just started coloring, because I just needed a break. And sometimes that's a nap, sometimes it's putting on music, like something that you're infusing. I guess the better word is, infusing culture, whatever that looks like for you. Just for you to just reconnect and check your mind off, because God knows mine is talking to me 24/7. And so those times where I get to like really just disconnect my mind from my conscious state is a blessing. So again, that's a big piece of the self-care element as well.
You said something about like asking for what you need is a form of self care. And I know many women struggle with that and setting boundaries. So what would you say to the woman who's struggling to ask for what she needs, and how she could take, like the baby steps of doing that instead of like jumping headfirst in the deep end, sink or swim situation?
Yeah, and normally when you jump in the deep end, not even knowing how deep it is, right? Who knows? Maybe you'll hit your head. It's not so deep. So many times we jump into the deep end, and a lot of times with boundaries, it comes in the form of explanations and apologizing. And the first thing, I teach boundaries because I had none. I had zero. I had zero growing up. I had zero in my marriage. And it really was the key, the ticket to me figuring out. it, Let me say it this way. We think that boundaries keep people away. We're afraid to enforce them because we think we're going to piss somebody off. We're going to hurt somebody's feelings. We're people pleasers. We don't want to, we want to say yes to everything because God forbid. But when you do that, what you're saying is you're saying no to yourself. And so the way that I like to talk about boundaries is that boundaries actually create closer relationships for you in your life, because it tells people permissible ways that you are open to engaging with them. So it's that Dirty Dancing reference, right? Patrick Swayze's like, this is my dance space, this is your dance space. And that's very much what boundaries are. It doesn't mean that you can't still see each other and communicate and still be in sync with one another. But what it means is that I get to have this area to like do what I need to do, and the same for you. And, asking for space, or, just speaking your mind and saying what it is that you want can just be in the form of no. No is a boundary. And so many times we say we're uncomfortable saying no because and so then we back it up with I can't, I've got this and I've got this and I got this and da da da. Or you say like, no, I'm so sorry, no, I so want to say yes, and you just get into this like vomit of like apologies because you're afraid of how you're looking. What ends up happening is that you open yourself up for negotiation when you start going down that path. And so the first step that I always teach around self-care and honoring yourself and what your needs are is practicing saying no. And that's it. No is a complete sentence, just in case anybody wondered. No is a complete sentence. And if you want to put some manners around it, you can say, oh goodness, no, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. That's it. That's all you have to say. And guess what? People aren't going to come at you. I talk about this one example because it's perfect. I had a client who she was in actually, one of my programs, and she was so afraid to say no to her ex-husband, who every time she had her son, he found some baseball game, got some tickets, and wanted to take him on her weekend. And it started to really make her angry. And so she was like, how do I say no? And I said, well, you just say no. Like, that's what you do. You just say no. And so we practiced, and I'll never forget, like, she came to me, she texted me, and she's like, oh my God, Wendy, it worked. And I was like, oh my God, tell me what happened. She's like, well, he did it again. And I simply said, no, that doesn't work for me. And he said, okay. And she was like, I can't believe it. Because in her head, she had all these stories, right? Of like, well, he's gonna, turn my son against me. And now my son's gonna be mad at me and this and that. And I was like, but that's not what it's about, right? When people are asking unreasonable things of you or have unrealistic expectations of you, all you're doing is setting yourself up for failure because you're putting yourself second. And it's the people pleasing mentality that gets to be worked on first. And that's the way that you start putting yourself first. That's a form of self care because 99% of the time you always say yes. And I bet that half of the time you really want to say no. I mean, think about the last time you said yes to something and you went, oh, why did I just do that? I don't have time for this. And then all of a sudden you're scrambling. And what ends up getting the low end of the stick? Something having to do with you so that you can do the thing that you promised for somebody else. Why? Why do you come second? Why are we so mean to ourselves? Right? Why is it that we don't hold ourselves to the same level that we would a friend? I mean, if a friend, or even how we talk, right? Self care can also be in the form of how you talk to yourself. So imagine the last time you said, "I'm such an idiot," or "I'm so stupid." Would you tell your friend she's an idiot or that they're stupid? No, you would never. But yet for you, it's like no big deal. It's like, oh, whatever. I'm saying it to myself, so it must be okay. It's not okay. It's not okay at all. And I get fired up about this because it used to be me. I mean, I am no different than anyone going, oh my God, I do that all the time. Why do I do this? How do I fix this? Like, I learned in my 40s, guys, like, it's possible to learn at any point in time, and any time you can change your relationship to people. I mean, if my ex-husband and I can be better friends now than we were when we were married and he cheated on me, like, honestly, like, and I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg of our story. But if he and I can be friends, like, I swear, I say, I'm like, anything is possible for anybody, because when you shift, so do they, and they notice it, and it's powerful. And it feels really good when you are standing in your power of your voice and your identity in every area of your life. It's powerful.
No is a complete sentence. And I think one of the challenges I had to work through was like releasing this idea that I'm being difficult or that I'm selfish, because that's gotten thrown
Yeah.
a lot in my face, especially working with boundaries and family members. It's like, why do you have to be so difficult? Or like, you enjoy conflict. No, I don't. I do not enjoy conflict. I don't go seeking it out. I don't care if I have a law degree. I just don't. I just get to like, it gets to this certain level where it's like I've kind of had enough, and then it's like done. No, not being difficult, not doing these things. No. Or training them on to like ask in advance. I
Yep.
worked with my mom. She'll text me if she needs me to do something for her. I'll be like, just text me the date. I'll let you know if it works, if it doesn't. But if you don't text me the date, I'm not going to like remember it. Because again, the voices in my head are a lot. Like, I'm working on writing a book, and I wake up sometimes still thinking about different scenes to write in the morning. I'm just like, come on, mind, calm down. Let me sleep. Just
I
let me sleep.
know it's hard to turn it off, especially those of us that, that's just our personality, especially those of us that are type A. It's so hard to silence our minds, and it does take practice. I mean, that's what I say. It's like it wasn't like I woke up one day and boom, all of a sudden I'm this boundary setting queen, right? That it didn't happen overnight. It happened with practice, it happened with support, it happened with accountability. And that's a lot of what I teach. I mean, I even have just a specific boundary setting course because it is a skill. It is a skill that gets to be learned. And you didn't just go ride a bike when you were 5 years old without the training wheels and you like went down the street the first time. How many times did you fall before you were able to ride it by yourself? Well, why is it any different learning another skill when you're a grown up? It's the same thing. And a lot of times we don't give ourselves permission to not get it right the first time. And every time you don't get it right, you have another opportunity to, it's a lesson. It's a lesson on what not to do next time. Or you notice when this is starting to happen, like what you tried the first time didn't work. So you get to try something different. And it's so, it just, I wish we could go back and have the mind of a 5 year old, right? Where we are fearless and we're looking at the world for the first time. I mean, that's really what I see divorce as, is really an opportunity for me to start looking at the world from a different lens now. And what, as a 40-year-old woman, like that's scary. But yet a 5 year old is like, oh my God, give me more. It's like they can't get enough. And so that's the mentality, right? That's the mindset shift that is so hard for a lot of people, but becomes so easy, right? Just like riding a bike once you figure it out.
And it's a process.
Absolutely.
Like with boundaries, it's okay to have like one set of boundaries for this season of your life, and then you notice you're transitioning into another season and realize those boundaries aren't supporting you. It's like boundaries aren't set in stone rules or laws that have to be once established followed, even when they're not working for you.
Exactly. Yep.
So
It's yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, it's something that a lot of us aren't born with and we have to learn, and it's okay. Like, you're not alone. That's all I want to say. Keep going. Sorry, interrupted
no,
you.
you're totally fine. So my next question is like, how did you start rebuilding your relationship with yourself and trusting your intuition, like going into your body and trusting and knowing when it's like a hell no instead of like a hell yes to doing something?
Yeah, it's the first step that I work with my clients on, which is figuring out what your values are. Your values are your it's your compass. It tells you what direction is northeast, west, south. And without your values, without knowing what your values are, it's hard to distinguish those moments where you want to say yes and the moments when you want to say no. And your values are things like honesty, connection, love, um, fun, relation, or trying to think, generosity, like all integrity, like all these different adjectives are values. And what I have learned and what I love to do with all of my clients and even teach in classes that I do is understanding like what your ride or die values are. So these are the ones that like you feel a physical reaction when they are not being honored, right? So I was cheated on. Guess what my number one value is? It used to be honesty. It has now become integrity for me because integrity means a lot more than just honesty. But no wonder I was like felt stabbed in the body, the heart a million times over by my ex-husband was because he completely stomped all over my number one value. And so once I understood like, oh, no wonder this hurts so bad. I then got to decide, well, how do I engage with someone who I don't trust? How do I do that? And it takes time. It takes a lot of practice, but it always goes back to the value set that you have. So respect is also a big value of mine. And so, how is it that I can feel like someone's being honest with me and respecting me at the same time? Well, he cheated. So I felt lied to and disrespected. So, oh my God, we've got value number two working out here. And what that taught me was that I was with a man who I didn't feel aligned with my values because if he valued honesty and respect, he would have not done what he did. He didn't care, right? Like that's a whole other podcast episode, but what I'm saying is that it allows me to decide who it is that I want to be, who I want to have in my life. Now, he's the father of my kids. He's not going anywhere and we're co-parenting, God knows, till the days we die. But it's how I show up in relation to him that has shifted as a result of me discovering my values. So, I did a lot of values work at my retreat this weekend with my clients, and it's really about how is it that I get to honor my values around work and around my kids and about myself and with my ex or, whatever the circumstance is. Anytime that you feel that tug of war going on inside of you, it's because there's a value that is like, I'm not, hello, I'm here, like don't forget me, this is really important to me. And until you really identify what that is and then you tie it to the feeling that you have inside of you, like that's when you're really able to realize when it's a yes and when it's a no. It always goes back to your values. I think we don't talk about our values enough. And, I'm in a new relationship now, and you better believe that the first thing I made sure to identify was that our values were aligned, because if they weren't, I don't want to be with someone who doesn't honor the same values that I do. And so I think a lot of times that we just make excuses or we create stories around, oh, you it's the 6 degrees of separation, like you'll go 6 degrees to get back to how they ladder to your value, instead of looking at it as like a direct line, which is what's most important. And to tie back to boundaries, your values are where your boundaries come from. So it's a combination of the two that's really powerful, and that really are, they lean on one another in terms of how it is that you go about living and being.
How did you discover that you and your partner in your new relationship have the same values? Like, was that a direct conversation, or were you just witnessing and watching? What did that look like?
Well, so I think one of the hardest lessons I learned in my marriage was, actions speak louder than words, right? Because his actions never matched his words. And so it's a combination of both, right? So it's about having conversation, something I was also really bad at. I didn't know how to talk. I had 4 emotions in my vocabulary. So it really gets down to curiosity and engaging in conversation, because you want to make sure that their actions and their words match up together. Curiosity is something that, as a society, I think we get afraid to ask people more questions. And it's something that, like, I preach from the mountaintops anytime I can, because there is so much misattunement in relationships where you hear something one way and somebody hears it totally different, right? So when you say the sky is blue, you have an image of maybe this really rich blue sky, whereas somebody else may have just like a baby blue image. That's not the same color. That's not the same blue, but that's what each of you see. And you're like, yeah, it's this like royal blue. And you're like, no, it's baby blue. No, it's royal blue. No, it's baby blue. You're both right. It's that you're both coming to the table with different experiences that are shaping your, your reality. And so we make assumptions that people see and hear things the same way that we do, and they don't. And so curiosity is really the way by which you figure out, like, is this person for real? Do they align with my values? Are they somebody that I can be with? Because, you can't rely on one or the other. They have to line up. And for a lot of women who go through divorce, like, we've all lived a life of assumption because we're on autopilot half the time. And that's when the mistakes and the disconnection starts happening. So, yeah, curiosity. It's all about curiosity.
I love the quote. It's curiosity killed the cat, but they cut it off there. And the rest of the quote is, but satisfaction brought it back. So it's like you're being curious. Sure, it kills the cat, but you're satisfied because you're learning about all of these things. And then you just come back to life.
Yeah. Yep. It's 100% true. So many of us are so afraid. What are they going to think? Am I being too nosy? Is it too early? Like, I've got clients that are dating right now and they're like, isn't it too early to ask those questions? I'm like, if it's on your mind, it's not too early. Like, that's what I say. And it's like, well, if, we are such a people pleasing society. It drives me crazy. Like, I used to be that. And I used to be like, oh, what are people going to say? What are they going to think? What is this person going to think? Well, I don't care. Like, I care about me having the information that I need in order for me to live my best life. No one's living in this body of mine. Like, it's just me. And it's up to me to fulfill myself. I used to look outside for somebody else to fill my cup. And I don't do that anymore because where did it get me? Like, sure, I have two amazing boys who I say, all that was good in my marriage and all the love that he and I had for one another, they're in my boys. And that is the best representation I could ever hope to have of that part of my life. And at the same time, like, it's up to me to make my life fulfilled. It's up to me to make my life beautiful and joyous and peaceful. And it's not up to anybody else anymore. And you get to put yourself on the same pedestal that you put other people. And sometimes, in order to get up there or for them to even come meet you up on that pedestal, they've got to answer some questions that they may not like. But those that are really meant to be in your life, that care about you, that love you, that want to invest themselves with you, you'll be worth it. So I don't know about you, but I'd rather have somebody who likes the fact that I ask a lot of questions. I mean, not to the point where I'm annoying, but like, I think through stuff and then I'm like, oh, wait, okay, now this is leading me down. It's like, you see like the little synapses firing, right? It's like I'm just verbalizing it. And it's made a huge difference in my life.
I think that's really important to, like, if it, like, is it too early? I'm like, just throw the dating rules just out the window, please. Just chuck them out. And like, if it's on your mind, like, you ask it. I know I've always been that way, but that was honed in. So right when 2020 was all happening and with the pandemic, I was on the East Coast and then I came back to Iowa and I was staying at my grandparents, and I literally took advantage of that time, and I would ask the most random questions all the
Good for
time.
you.
But that was like, I was there. I want to have these questions. I was being curious, and my grandma would always give me a look. I'm like, yeah, I know it's a weird question, but I know it came out of left field, but I learned a lot, and that deepened our relationship with each other. But it was just very interesting how I gave myself permission just to ask and then
Yeah.
acted upon it, instead of,
Yeah.
taking up that mental space of like, do I ask this question or do I say this, or like, what, that mental back and forth exhaustion.
Yeah. And a lot of people, I mean, listen, I get it. We all have past wounds and fears and everything. And what I always say is that, fear isn't real, right? It's false evidence appearing real. That's what it stands for. And, I would rather have facts than live a life on assumption, which is what I did for 2 decades in my marriage. And I'll never do it again. One of the things that, my Jeff, I mean, I call him my husband because we're committed and wear rings, but he from day one, like we have been all about communication. We have both made a commitment to also talk about anything and everything that comes up. And it doesn't matter how hard it's going to be. Like we love each other enough to not want to put the other person through what either one of us had been through before. Right. So we are not afraid to have the hard conversations. Are they fun? No, not at all. But at least I know that we're both coming to the table, right? My number one value, integrity, with integrity and with respect. I used to think that the louder I spoke, the more I would be heard. It is the opposite, everybody listening, which I'm sure everybody, is probably going, oh, yeah, I can see that. But that's the house I grew up in. And I didn't know any different until I got divorced and started learning about this stuff and started to realize the power of my words. And this goes to how you talk to yourself as well, but your words are powerful. And I say that to my kids a lot, like your words are really powerful. And we don't think about that enough when we're talking to ourselves, when we're talking to our kids, our family, our friends, our spouses, our boyfriends, our girlfriends. Like we don't think about it. And it's something that I want so badly for there to be a shift in how it is that people approach just life in general. I mean, we're living in a world that is, I was talking about this in Sedona this weekend. Like, we live in a world with so much fear that it's so incredibly important that those of us who can see through it help other people, right? I call it shining the light. Like, we have to shine the light. And if we're running around afraid of what other people are going to think of us, well, in every single situation, you're dimming your light. You dim your light when you're not being honest with yourself. And I don't know about you, or anybody listening, but like I did that for 2 decades and I am not dimming my light ever, ever again, because those that are attracted to it will come. And those who think otherwise, like I don't want them in my world anyway, because they're light dimmers and I want them to go away anyway. So, you have to look at it that way. It's like I always say, like when I went on job interviews, like I used to be so nervous. And then I finally realized, I was like, wait a second, I have to like them. I'm giving them 40 hours a week plus. Like I better like them because I'm spending the most time with these people. So they have to dazzle me. I'm amazing and they have to dazzle me if they want me to say yes to them. And, it was that mindset shift that changed everything, right? When you finally get to that point. And it just, like you said, it takes practice, it takes learning, and it takes confidence. And that's something that a lot of us struggle with. And confidence isn't the same as self-esteem or self-worth. They're all linked, but they're all very different and they play into one another. So yeah, I feel like I wandered off of.
No, you're perfect.
I'm like,
explain more about your confidence, self-esteem, and self-worth comment that you just said.
Yeah. So, your self-care is really what do you want to call it? Like the conveyor belt, right? To the land of self-esteem, the land of self-worth, and the land of confidence. Your self-esteem is really about how it is that you see yourself, right? What you see when you look in the mirror, and your worth is really around your contributions. And when you see your self-esteem and your self-worth, both of those together lead to you being confident, having confidence in who it is that you are. Part of why we have such crappy self-esteem is that we focus on our faults, right? Our flaws. Like, oh my God, I hate, I've gained the COVID-20 still, I can't get it off. Or, oh my God, I have a pimple on my face. Or, I don't know, something physical, right? And all we see when we look in the mirror are our flaws. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why is it that instead of focusing on, the fact that you have a pimple on your face, like, wow, you have beautiful eyes. Like, oh my God, your hair looks gorgeous today. Like, I've got great hair. Like, I have beautiful eyes. And look at my eyelashes today. Like, I'm rocking my eyelashes. No, I look in the mirror and I'm like, crap, I just got a pimple. Like, great. Forget about anything else that's beautiful about me, right? And we focus on the flaws. And, one of the things I teach is how it is that we get to love our flaws because they make us who it is that we are. Like, we're human. Humans are not perfect. We are not, and no offense, like, just because you see models and celebrities, like, it's not, I call it a Facebook facade. It is like a Hollywood facade, you guys. Like, I mean, look at all the stuff coming out now. I know this is relevant for today, but like all the stuff about Adam Levine, like him and his Bahati, I forget, I don't know how to pronounce his wife's name, but like she's stunning. Like, who would cheat on that, right? Like, who would do that? And yet it's like, but Adam Levine's a human being. He's tempted just like the rest of us are, right? And I'm not excusing it. I'm just demonstrating that we are human beings and we make mistakes. And we don't look the look all the time and we're not perfect. But yet that's all we focus on, right? Like, now all anybody's going to remember is that Adam Levine is coming out looking like a cheater. Not that he's an incredible musician, was on The Voice and now he's the cheater. And it's the same thing. It's like, this is what we do to ourselves. And so when we're not putting ourselves on a pedestal, and that's our self-esteem, well, of course you don't have worth in yourself because your worth is rooted in your flaws. Your worth is rooted in the good things, your beautiful hair, your beautiful eyes, the fact that Adam Levine's a great musician. Like, your worth is in your talent. And yet when you focus on your flaws, you have no self-esteem, you have no self-worth, and therefore you have no confidence. And so it's all mindset. It's all a mindset shift.
Yeah, I think it's like giving yourself grace. I know a lot of times, like, because integrity is an important value of my own. And so it's like, if I set, we'll just say, like, this boundary or this rule, yes, I expect myself to reach it, but I also allow my humanness to come in.
100%.
Because otherwise it's racing after perfection, and perfection doesn't exist. And then it's just like beating myself up all over again for no reason.
Yeah, I say we're perfectly imperfect. I I don't ever want to be perfect. I was a perfectionist for my whole life and it was exhausting because it's a level that none of us can ever achieve. It's just not possible. And so the sooner that we recognize that we're all human beings, that means that we're not perfect. It means that we're going to mess up. But that doesn't define you unless you let it.
I want to ask one more question that's been like nagging at me before we get into the final questions. So what was the belief that you had to heal and rewire in creating the co-parenting relationship with your ex and being friends, going from like he's cheating and disrespecting you, not being honest, to being able to be a friend?
Oh, it was a shift in me. And it was that, and I get emotional about this because I care about him a lot, because he's the father of my kids. And, the belief was that he he did the best with the tools that he was given. And while that is not anywhere near what I deserve, it's not his fault. Um, he made a bad choice and he has to live with that for the rest of his life. I don't. He has to live with that. Um, and I know that he does his best, and it's okay that it's not what I need. Um, the way that I say it is that I would rather that I would rather he give 100% of what to me is about 50% of what I hope to have than for him to give anything less. And he, I know that he's flawed and he's got things that he gets to still work on from his life, from his past, from his childhood. And, um, you know, I don't look at him with hate anymore. I don't look at him with, you know, like wanting to just rip his eyeballs out for what he did. Because I just don't blame him anymore. Marriage takes two people. And until you take responsibility for 100% of your 50, then you can't look at the other person any other way. And it was really in that point where I stopped thinking that his half was my responsibility, right? I kept saying to myself, like, why doesn't he want me? Why isn't he picking me? What's wrong with me? And it had nothing to do with that. It had nothing, his choice had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with what was missing for him. And instead of finding it for himself, he went somewhere else to get it. And that is a choice. We all have that choice. He made one that impacted the rest of a lot of people's lives. And I also know that, like, I would not want to be married to him anymore. Like, I am so not, like, when we see each other now at the kids sporting events or back to school nights and all of that, and even when I see him now, like, there's things that, like, he's still the same person and they annoy the crap out of me. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I don't have to do this and I don't have to live with this anymore. Or like his mannerisms piss me off now. Like, they never pissed me off before. But it's like, as you shift, right? Like, I also noticed how when I stopped coming at him with negative energy, like, I'm a big believer, obviously, as an energy healer, like, we bring energy to the table. Like, we're all made up of, cells and molecules. And, um, we other people feel that. Like, you guys know, when you walk into a room, when you walk into somebody's office and you can just feel like, if they're in a bad mood, you're like, oh, I gotta, ooh, I just felt that, right? And it's the same thing. Like, so imagine if you are exuding hate and pain and, like, resentment towards someone, they're going to be on edge coming up to you, versus if you just are, like, oh yeah, there they are, right? Your energy is neutral. So it's about getting yourself back to, like, that neutral place and understanding that their actions, their decisions, their choices have nothing to do with you. Nothing. And that's when I just stopped hating him. And and I forgave him. Like, I got to the point where I told him, I forgive you, because I know you did what you thought was best at the time with the tools that you had. And I forgive you. And that, not everybody gets to that point. It took me probably 4 years to get there. But and that's not to say we get along every day. Like, we just had a little disagreement yesterday about something about one of our sons, um, where it was like a miscommunication through our son. But, like, we always just come back to neutral, and it's not like, the old versions of ourselves are coming out again, because I'm not that person anymore. So he shows up differently.
There's so much more I wanted to talk about on this episode. We didn't even get to it, but that's fine.
Like, I can come back.
And then, like, yeah, and then talking more about, like, healing from your relationship with your ex, getting to that point, just diving in more. But I think it's really important. Like, I tell people about the forgiveness aspect. Like, you don't necessarily have to forgive that person right in the moment. Like, you could desire to want to forgive them, and you could say, like, I'm willing to forgive. Literally, that's all you have to say, is you're willing to forgive. Because if you say, like, I forgive you, and you don't feel it in your body energetically, like, it's just off. And you're kind of betraying yourself and your own emotions, and acknowledging that, like, you want to forgive, but you're just not there yet.
Well, and it starts with yourself. Like, it took me a really long time to understand self-forgiveness, to know what that was going to look like, if anything, if at all. I mean, if you had asked me 6 years ago if I was ever going to forgive this man, I would have said, you are crazy. Never will I forgive him. And I did. And it was because I forgave myself. And it took me a long time. It actually took me multiple courses of like spiritual psychology, energy healing to get to that place. Like the energy piece is very much tied to this because I know he and I have been tied in multiple past lives together. When you enter into a committed relationship as deep as the one that we had, he was my soulmate for sure. Like I felt that in my bones. Um, and so we had exchanged a lot of energy with one another, and I had to go, I thank God found the right people to help me to really disconnect, to get my fragments back, to send his back to him. Sound has a lot of therapeutic elements to it. Sound heals. I mean, think about it. If you're like in a bad mood, you like pull on music because either it calms you down or it like speaks to you and it makes you feel better. Like sound is really powerful. And so, I also don't want to discount that piece, which I know we didn't really get to as much, but the energy piece is really important for it was really important for my healing to also get me to the place where I don't physically feel anything. Like there used to be a time where he would drop my kids off and I could feel his negative, like I could just feel him on my body. And it was like I wanted to crawl out of my skin. And anytime I was around him, there was just like this physical reaction and I hated it. And I was like, I tried all these different things. And it really wasn't until I experienced theta healing and I did sound therapy that my world totally shifted and changed. And so it's not just a one stop healing mechanism, right? It's holistic, it's mind, body, spirit, like mind, body, soul. Like all three areas require healing. You can't just do one and expect the other three to follow suit. You have to actually work them all simultaneously. And ultimately, for me, when I talk about when I talk about shifting your mindset, the root of that is faith in the universe, God, source, whatever it is that you call it. Having faith, grace, and compassion are crucial to the entire healing process. And without that, you're going to stay stuck. You're just going to stay where you are. And, it's no fun. It's not a healthy place to be. But again, that's one of the reasons why I do this work is because I bring all three, right? It's kind of like the Trinity, right? I bring this Trinity to the table for my clients where we work on mind, body, soul through faith.
Well, we can just mic drop it right there.
And drop.
Done. Wendy, I just have one more question, but thank you so much for coming on. Like, you shared so much, and I just really appreciate you sharing your story and opening up. And I think we'll have you on again to talk about the energetical side and how you brought that in as well, because I know that's a big piece, and that's been a big piece in my own healing journey. But my final question is, what does living a naked life mean to you?
Oh, living a naked life means being willing to be vulnerable and trust. Again, like faith is really the foundation for my whole uh, recovery healing process. Living naked is trusting in source and trusting that I'm being led in my highest and best way possible, even when it doesn't look so shiny and bright.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
You're
It was
so
just a joy.
welcome. Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate you. I loved our conversation. I know we could talk for another hour, so I'd love to come back too, because the energy piece is really important as well. So
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Naked Life Podcast. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to this podcast, and share with all your friends.